I worked the night shift alone. Then I heard footsteps. It was just past 2:30 a.m. on a chilly Thursday morning in late October. The streets of Manchester were empty, swallowed by fog that rolled in thick from the canals. I, Daniel Harper, had just clocked in for my night shift at Wren & Sons, a small, family-run printing warehouse on Deansgate. The building was old, with creaking wooden floors and long, narrow hallways that smelled faintly of ink and damp cardboard. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal. The hum of the fluorescent lights above and the occasional buzz of the security cameras were my only company. I made my rounds, checking the inventory, noting down orders, and occasionally sipping the lukewarm coffee I had brewed in the corner kitchenette. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, sending shivers down my spine, but inside, I tried to focus on the routine. Around 3:47 a.m., just as I was sorting a stack of freshly printed posters in the far corner of the warehouse, I heard it. A soft, deliberate step echoing somewhere above me. I froze, listening. The warehouse had a second floor, mostly unused, and I was certain I was alone. The footsteps stopped for a moment, then resumed, slow and measured, moving closer to the staircase that led to my section. I called out, my voice shaking slightly. "Hello? Is someone there?" Only the echo of my own words replied. My heart raced. I grabbed the nearest flashlight and slowly made my way toward the staircase, each step creaking under my weight, amplifying the sound in the silent building. As I reached the foot of the stairs, I caught a shadow flit past the far doorway, just beyond the storage racks. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. The beam of my flashlight swept across the room, but found nothing. Only the stacks of cardboard boxes, eerily still. I told myself it was probably a rat or some stray animal, yet something deep inside made my stomach knot. Then it came again, the footsteps. This time, they were deliberate, heavier, moving as if someone or something was pacing right above me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop suddenly, my breath forming faint clouds in the cold air. I could feel the hairs on my arms stand on end, and the sense of being watched was overwhelming. I wanted to leave, call security, or at least step outside for fresh air, but a part of me, some mix of curiosity and disbelief, kept me rooted to the spot, and that's when I heard the whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible, like someone exhaling my name. "Daniel!" I froze completely, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. The whisper had come from somewhere above, from the direction of the old mezzanine that led to the storage loft. I could see the faint outline of dust motes dancing in the beam of light, stirred by a cold draft that seemed to seep through the walls. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to run to the front door and never look back, but some irrational part of me kept me rooted, wanted to see what was there. The footsteps resumed, this time descending the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The sound echoed to the cavernous warehouse, bouncing off metal shelving and stacks of paper. My stomach churned, a cold sweat running down my back. I took a cautious step forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight, betraying my presence. "Who's there?" I called again, my voice cracking slightly. Silence answered me, followed by that faint whisper once more. "Daniel!" It was soft, almost intimate, yet there was an edge to it that made my skin crawl. I approached the staircase slowly, gripping the railing as if it were my lifeline. The light from my flashlight danced across the walls, revealing nothing but shadows. My mind raced through possibilities. A burglar, a prank, a trick of my imagination. Yet the sound of footsteps moving independently of me told me otherwise. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw the shadow again, flitting across the far end of the room, just beyond the towering racks of boxes. My breath quickened. I called out one last time, trying to keep my composure. "I'm calling security." The only response was a hollow echo of my words. I felt drawn to the shadow, inexplicably compelled to follow it. Each step I took toward the far rack seemed to stretch time itself. My flashlight illuminated old crates stamped with faded letters, stacks of forgotten paperwork, and cobwebs in the corners that hadn't been disturbed in decades. I could hear the faint sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, mixing with the soft, deliberate footsteps that seemed to be just ahead of me. As I rounded the corner, I froze again. There was nothing there. Not a person, not an animal. Just a cold, empty space and the echo of the footsteps. My hands shook so violently that I nearly dropped the flashlight. The beam of light swung across the room, catching something out of the corner of my eye. A figure. It was fleeting, barely perceptible, a blur at the far end of the warehouse. I blinked and it was gone. My rational mind told me I was seeing things, that exhaustion and the monotony of the night shift were playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't my imagination. I took a step forward, then another, each movement slow and deliberate. The warehouse seemed to grow colder with every passing second, the shadows stretching unnaturally. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights flickered, and a distant bang echoed somewhere in the back room, making me jump. "Who's there?" I whispered, barely audible over the racing of my own heart. Silence. Then again that whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Daniel." This time was closer, almost behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. But nothing was there. Panic began to creep in. My logical mind fought with the fear rising inside me. I knew the building security cameras were operational, yet the notion that someone or something was moving around without triggering any alarms made my skin crawl. The footsteps resumed, now circling above me, like they were taunting me. Pacing deliberately in the mezzanine above, I moved back toward the main aisle, try to keep some distance between myself and the source of sounds. My flashlight illuminated an old printing press, silent and cold, its metal surface reflecting the weak light like a specter. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of the room, stretching longer as if alive. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, and tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Then I heard it. Another sound this time, distinct from the footsteps, a low, guttural laugh, barely audible but unmistakably human. It echoed through the warehouse, bouncing off the walls and making the air itself seem heavy. My legs felt rooted to the floor, my mind struggling to reconcile what I was hearing. No one should be here. The building was locked, and I had the only key. I took a shaky breath and whispered to myself, "Okay, Daniel, just calm down. It's probably someone playing a prank or rats or something stupid." But deep down, I knew it wasn't rats. No animal could move with such deliberate pacing, such intent. The footsteps stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever experienced, pressing in on me from all sides. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven, in the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, flickering intermittently. Then came the sound I had been dreading, the unmistakable creak of the metal grate above the mezzanine, as if someone or something was descending toward me. My flashlight shook violently in my hands. I took a step backward, then another, and nearly stumbled over a stack of boxes. My heart was hammering in my chest. The air felt impossibly cold, and the shadows seemed to shift with a life of their own. I wanted to run, but my feet refused to move. Then the whisper again, this time clearer, sharper, closer. "Daniel, don't leave." I spun around, trying to see who or what was speaking. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, landing on an empty aisle. Nothing. My rational mind screamed at me to flee, to run to the exit, to call anyone, but my body remained frozen, caught in the grip of fear I had never known before. And then I heard it, a slow, deliberate step behind me. not on the floorboards, but directly on the metal grate of the mezzanine above, descending toward the main aisle. I knew without looking that something was coming for me. The shadows seemed to gather, thickening around the stacks of boxes, the old printing press, and the empty hallways beyond. The air grew colder still, each breath forming a thin, misty cloud in front of me. I could feel a presence, heavy, oppressive, watching me, moving closer with every second. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then a loud bang from the back door echoed through the warehouse, making me jump violently. The flashlight slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor. I scrambled to pick it up, my eyes wide and searching, but the beam only revealed empty space, dust, and long-forgotten shadows. I backed into the aisle between the racks, trying to find a corner, any place to hide. My mind raced, thinking of the security room, of the cameras, of calling police. But I knew something was wrong, something unnatural. The footsteps resumed, slow, methodical, circling above me, echoing the empty warehouse as if mocking my fear. The whisper came one final time, chilling me to the bone. You shouldn't be here. I could no longer deny it. I was not alone, and whatever or whoever was in that warehouse with me, it was not human. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, each beat drowning out any rational thought. The warehouse, once a place of mundane routine, had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and sounds that seemed alive. I backed into a corner near the old printing press, the cold metal pressing against my back as if it could somehow shield me from what was coming. My hand shook uncontrollably, gripping the flashlight, which flickered intermittently, casting long, trembling shadows across the stacked boxes. The footsteps above me moved again, slow, deliberate, circling the mezzanine as if hunting. I could hear the soft scrape of nails against the metal grate, each sound sending a jolt of fear through my body. I swallowed hard, trying to control my breathing, but the icy air seemed to freeze my lungs, making every inhalation a painful effort. I thought of calling for help, but my phone was in the locker room, locked away. And even if I ran to it, the front door was on the opposite side of the warehouse, far from where the presence now seemed focused. My rational mind screamed at me to flee, to run, to scream, but my body refused. I was rooted in terror, trapped by the oppressive weight of the unknown. Then I heard it, a soft, dragging sound coming from the far end of the aisle. Something heavy, moving slowly across the floor. I shined the flashlight in that direction, the beam slicing through the darkness. At first, there was nothing. Then, a flicker at the corner of my eye, a shadow detaching itself from the wall. It moved inhumanly, almost gliding, yet each step produced a subtle scrape of shoes or claws on the concrete floor. I stepped back, my heel hitting a box and sending it tumbling over. The noise seemed to stir the figure, which paused for a fraction of a second, then turned its featureless face toward me. I couldn't see eyes, nose, or mouth, just a smooth, dark void where a face should have been. My breath caught in my throat. The flashlight trembled in my hands, and the shadows around the warehouse seemed to lean toward me, stretching unnaturally, as if drawn by the presence. The figure moved closer, slowly, deliberately. Each step echoed in the cavernous space, amplified by the high ceiling and empty corners. I could hear my own heartbeat, frantic and uneven, and the soft whisper that had haunted me since the mezzanine. Daniel, this time it was insistent, demanding, and filled with malevolent hunger. I stumbled backward, falling against the metal frame of a shelf. The shelf shuddered, boxes shifting and falling to ground, scattering papers and rattling old printing equipment. The noise did nothing to drive away the figure. It glided over the scattered debris, silent for the moment, then resumed its deliberate approach. Panic overtook me. I ran, my shoes slipping on spilled ink and dust. The flashlight beam danced wildly, illuminating twisted shadows and stacks of forgotten crates. The figure followed, slower than I ran, but relentless, its presence oppressive, almost tangible. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to plummet further, my breath forming thick clouds in front of my face. I darted toward the staircase, hoping to reach the mezzanine for some kind of advantage. Each step was treacherous, the wooden boards groaning and threatening to give way under my weight. My heart was pounding, my lungs burning, but I forced myself upward, desperate to escape the oppressive presence behind me. As I reached the mezzanine, I stumbled into the shadows of old office desks and filing cabinets. Papers fluttered in the draft, creating ghostly shapes that seemed to mock me. I paused, straining to listen. The footsteps were no longer on the floor below. They were on the stairs, ascending now, slow and deliberate, each one a measured threat. I backed against the wall, my flashlight shaking in my hands. The figure appeared at the top of the stairs, its featureless face a black void, its form slightly hunched, almost predatory. The whisper came again, sharper, closer. "Don't run, Daniel." I forced myself to speak, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who were you?" The figure didn't answer. It tilted its head slightly, as if examining me, then moved toward me with a grace that was unsettlingly human, yet disturbingly wrong. I realized that the mezzanine, cramped and cluttered, offered no real escape. The staircase behind me seemed like the only way down, but I knew descending meant facing the warehouse again, and with it, the unknown figure that had been stalking me. I could feel the air around it, thick and cold, pressing against my skin, making it hard to move, hard to breathe. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the mezzanine. My head snapped in that direction, and for the first time, I saw movement beyond the figure. A stack of wooden pallets had collapsed, spilling debris across the floor, and in the shadows, I thought I saw another figure, or maybe it was the first one, split somehow into multiple forms. My mind struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. The footsteps below accelerated, no longer measured, no longer human. The scraping of nails, the dragging of feet, the faint metallic clangs. It all mixed into a chaotic symphony of terror. I backed further into the corner, flashlight trembling violently, my mind screaming for some logical explanation. There was none. The figure moved closer, and I could feel its presence in every nerve, every breath, every heartbeat. The air around it seemed to warp, shadows bending unnaturally. Then it stopped, a mere foot away from me. I could see the outline of its form more clearly now, dark and shifting, as if the darkness itself clung to it, absorbing the weak light of my flashlight. It tilted its head, and the whisper came again, directly into my ear, though nothing had touched me. "You shouldn't have come here." I stumbled backward, tripping over an old desk chair. The figure advanced, gliding effortlessly over the scattered debris. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, and ran toward the edge of the mezzanine, looking desperately for any way down, any exit, any hope. My flashlight beam cut across the floor below, revealing the empty racks, the long shadows, the cold, silent machinery. And then I heard it, the slow, deliberate creak of another staircase, this one at the far end of the mezzanine. Another presence? Or the same one, moving to cut off my escape? I couldn't tell. My mind was a storm of fear, exhaustion, and disbelief. I made a snap decision. I jumped toward the far edge, hoping to reach a lower level. The boards groaned under my weight, threatening to give way. As I landed, the flashlight slipped from my hands again, spinning across the floor and illuminating the void briefly. For an instant, I saw it fully. Its form loomed over the edge of the mezzanine, faceless, shadowed, and immense, as if it could engulf the entire space in darkness. A cold wind rushed past me, carrying with a faint smell of damp earth and rusted metal. The footsteps and whispers were all around me now, echoing from above, below, and from every corner of the warehouse. My breath came in ragged gasps. I knew then that whatever this was, it was not bound by physical laws, and had been waiting for someone like me. I ran blindly toward the nearest exit door, the one leading to the alley behind the building. The handle was icy, and the door creaked open slowly, revealing the foggy streets outside. For a brief moment, the night air seemed to wash over me, bringing a false sense of relief. But the warehouse behind me remained silent, dark, and still. Too still. I didn't stop running. I didn't look back. But deep in my mind, I knew that the figure hadn't left. It was waiting patient for the next night shift, for the next soul to wander into its lair. And I knew somehow that my encounter with it had only just begun. I stumbled into the foggy alley behind Wren & Sons, my lungs burning from the cold night air and the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The city of Manchester was silent, unusually so, as if the fog had swallowed every distant sound. Streetlights flickered, casting pale, trembling circles of light onto the wet pavement. My mind raced, but a fragment of reason whispered that I couldn't simply walk away and pretend it hadn't happened. Something had followed me. I could feel it. I paused at the corner, clutching the railing of a small stairwell leading to the subway station. My hands were trembling violently, and my breath came in ragged clouds. I tried to calm myself, to make sense of what I had just experienced. Was it a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, the monotony of the night shift, and the stale air of the warehouse? Or was it something else, something ancient, something alive in the shadows? A sudden noise made me spin around. From the alley behind me came the faintest sound of movement, soft and deliberate. I squinted to the fog, straining to see, and for an instant I thought I saw a dark shape slipping between the buildings, gliding rather than walking, impossibly silent. My stomach dropped. I had no doubt anymore. Whatever had been in the warehouse had followed me, or at least it was still watching. I fled toward the subway entrance, ignoring the wetness seeping through my shoes, ignoring the echoing footsteps behind me that didn't seem to match my own. As I descended into the station, the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, making the shadows dance along the grimy walls. I tried to catch my reflection in the darkened panels, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow moving behind me that didn't belong to anyone in the station. The train screeched into the station moments later, empty except for a lone conductor at the far end. I rushed aboard, sliding into a seat, still clutching my flashlight, though the battery was dying. I peered through the fogged-up windows as the train began to move, hoping to put as much distance between myself and the warehouse as possible. But the city outside seemed unreal, distorted by the darkness, the fog, and the fear clinging to my senses. I tried to recall everything that had happened. The whispers, the faceless figure, the footsteps on the mezzanine, the dragging sounds in the aisles. I had always believed in the ordinary, the explainable, burglars, accidents, rats, the old boards creaking. But none of those explanations accounted for the sense of sentience, the deliberate stalking, the voice that had spoken my name with cold certainty. I spent the ride checking my surroundings, noting every shadow, every figure on the platform as the train passed through silent stations. Every dark corner seemed alive. Every empty bench seemed to hold a hidden presence. My flashlight's beam flickered weakly in my lap, casting long shadows across the seats. I wished I had brought pepper spray, a baton, anything to defend myself with, but the reality was that nothing could have prepared me for this. At King's Cross Street Pancras Station, I forced myself off the train and out into the dimly lit streets. I tried to convince myself that the distance would break whatever connection had been formed. Yet even as I walked briskly toward my apartment, the feeling persisted, The weight of eyes unseen, of footsteps that might not belong to the living, of a presence that lingered just beyond a veiled perception. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left every light on, the television humming in the corner, the curtains drawn tight. But even then, in the comfort of my flat in Islington, I heard it. The whisper, faint but clear, almost as if it was inside my head this time. Daniel. I jumped from the sofa, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. Nothing was there. Only the shadows in the corners of the room seemed thicker than normal, bending unnaturally toward me. I sat for hours, trying to rationalize, trying to convince myself it was a hallucination, a lingering fear from the warehouse. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The next night, I forced myself to return to work. The warehouse had to be checked, supplies counted, and no one else was available for the shift. The taxi dropped me off under the dim streetlights of Deansgate, and I could already feel the chill in the air settling into my bones. The door to Wren & Sons creaked as I entered, the smell of old ink and damp cardboard greeting me like a familiar, yet menacing, presence. I switched on the lights, the fluorescent tubes buzzing weakly. The space seemed emptier than the night before, silent except for the faint hum of the security system. Yet as I walked toward the aisles, my flashlight scanning every corner, I knew the warehouse was not empty. The shadows seemed to shift subtly, almost alive, and the air felt thicker, heavier than it should have been. I checked the mezzanine first, my hands gripping the railing. Everything seemed untouched, perfectly normal, or as normal as the old warehouse could be. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my shaking hands. Maybe last night had been a trick of exhaustion, of imagination running wild. Maybe the figure had never existed outside my fear. Then I heard it, the soft scrape of movement above me, slow, deliberate, unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I froze, trying to make sense of it, but rational thought had long since abandoned me. The footsteps grew louder, moving along the mezzanine floor, circling, pacing, as if studying me. I could hear the faint whisper, almost a breath against my ear, though no one was there. "You came back." I backed away slowly, flashlight beam trembling, scanning every shadow, every stack of boxes. I knew now that I had made a mistake. The presence had waited, patient, knowing I would return. My rational mind screamed at me to run, but my feet refused to obey. The warehouse felt alive, every shadow a potential threat, every sound amplified in the cavernous space. A movement caught my eye, a dark form at the far end of the mezzanine, featureless, gliding slowly toward me. The air grew colder, the shadows longer, stretching unnaturally toward me. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, my mouth dry, my mind screaming in terror. The figure tilted its head, and I felt a wave of malevolence wash over me, a silent threat that seemed to seep into my very bones. Then it spoke, the whisper louder this time, almost a hiss. "You shouldn't have come alone." I stumbled backward, tripping over a stack of crates. Crashing to the floor, the figure advanced, gliding silently, the darkness around it thickening, pressing in on me. I scrambled to my feet, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows, but every movement revealed only more darkness, more ambiguity. My instincts screamed at me to run, to flee, to escape the building before it was too late. But the exit was far, and I could sense the figure positioning itself between me and freedom. My heart pounded, and I realized with dawning horror that whatever this was, it knew me. It had been waiting, watching, perhaps planning. And now that I had returned, it was no longer patient. The footsteps began again, circling, pacing, echoing through the warehouse like the ticking of a dark, sentient clock. The whisper followed with every step. "You belong here now." And in that moment, I understood that my encounter with the faceless figure was far from over. it was only the beginning. I didn't know how long I had been frozen in the corner of the warehouse, staring at the dark void that had once been a figure. The whispers had faded, leaving only the oppressive silence and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. My flashlight lay at my feet, flickering weakly, casting the shadows of the stacked boxes like looming specters. Slowly, I realized I had to move, to escape, though every step toward the exit felt like wading through invisible hands that tried to hold me back. My heart pounded in my ears, every nerve screaming, yet something compelled me forward. The cold air of the night outside seeped in through the slightly ajar door, bringing with it a small measure of relief. I stumbled into the alley, gasping for breath, the fog swirling around me as if it were alive. The streets were empty, the city silent, yet I could feel it. Some presence lingering, watching, waiting. I didn't look back. I couldn't. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door behind me, my hands shaking violently. Every light in the flat was on, yet shadows seemed to gather in the corners, thicker than they should have been. I knew deep down that it hadn't followed me, at least not yet, but the memory of the faceless figure, the whispers, the footsteps, would haunt me forever. And though the warehouse stood empty now, silent and seemingly lifeless, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Some doors, once open, never truly close.